What's up, everybody? Ray Coffman here, raycoffmanart.com, and today what I'm going to do is my first real art tutorial. This is a digital painting that I did for all my Patreon supporters. It was my print of the month on patreon.com/raycoffman. That's RAYCOFFMAN. If you want to get a print of the month and get access to this video a week early, it will appear on my YouTube channel, but it will be a week after my patrons receive it. So they get a week early access. If you're into this kind of thing, then you can subscribe there for just $1 and get access to my videos. So without further ado, I'm going to get into this one. This is, of course, Akuma from Street Fighter. I wanted to get into making this character like, mayhem and destruction, and I really wanted that to reflect in the piece. So let's get into it real quick. So first off, the first thing you're going to notice here is that I have it's a lot of fire, a lot of things going on here. So what I'm doing here is you're looking at the foreground flames. I like to work in basically three layers, three areas. Foreground, background, middle ground. Middle ground is usually where I have my characters. Foreground is usually where I do my overlay effects and like flames, lighting, stuff like that. And then the background is just kind of the spice that goes onto the piece. So what I'm doing here that you're seeing is I am using some textured brushes. Right, this is a textured airbrush that I'm using right now. I'm using Clip Studio Paint EX, the new version. Clip Studio Paint, or it's Manga Studio 5 is what it used to be called, so now it's Clip Studio Paint. So I'm going in, and as you can see right here in the bottom right corner, I'm using different types of brushes, airbrushes, watercolor brushes, and oil brushes. Just to really layer the effects on the flames. I had a hard, rough outline that I drew that I wanted the fire to look like, and I went through and I just brushed the edges ever so slightly with a watercolor brush. And I do design a lot of my own brushes, so if you have questions, put them in the comments as far as like what kind of settings I use for my brushes and things like that. So right now I'm going over the foreground. I did add a gradient to the background behind the fire to give it an ominous look. Anytime you have an evil or ominous or dominant character, you want those dark saturated tones like purples and dark reds and stuff like that to really accent like darkness and power and stuff like that. So there are different color palettes you want to use for different character types, and that's what I like to do in my work. So right now what I'm doing in the foreground is I am working in a multiply layer. And basically what that means is a layer setting where you can switch it over, and it just reduces kind of the amount of paint on the item, and it accentuates the colors with different shades of light that you're using in your paint. And what I'm doing is I'm reflecting the silhouette, the lighting that's behind him by painting over him in the foreground. So that's how I'm getting that effect with, you can see the fire shining from behind him like it's shining out from around him. Like if you observe in real life, when someone's standing in front of a light, that light kind of engulfs them a little bit. And I do that in the foreground. It's real easy to do, and I'm just painting on the same layers, that front foreground fire. So right now you see me just kind of filling in different spots and making that look like it's shining out from behind him. Kind of swallowing up the line art a little bit, give it a more painterly, a more real world look to the lighting aesthetic. And now what I'm doing is I'm going in on the character layer in the middle ground layer, and I'm using my oil brushes and my watercolor brushes that I've created myself, and I'm just adding light and texture. What I like to do, a lot of digital artists will use just straight blacks and straight whites to do highlights and shadows. I like to sample the base color and then use dark shades and tones and light shades and tones of that base color. I feel like it gives it a more full, more rich, more realistic look. So that's what I'm going for here. You will make line art adjustments. Like some of the line art, you'll see me erase as I go along here, like on his forehead there. Makes sense in the line art phase, and then once you begin to paint, you'll find things that you don't necessarily want to be in the piece, and you'll go in, you'll edit those, or you'll delete those. It's totally fine. Part of the process. Now I'm adding the light and the glare onto his different the ropes and his bondages on his wrists and the huge prayer beads he wears around his neck, giving that a more real light aesthetic. Now what I do for the shine that you see over top of the whole thing, I start a new layer over top of the entire piece, like a top layer. And I call that my top light. And that's what I'm painting on here. I'm painting over the line art. I'm painting over the overlay and multiply layers that I did for the lighting. So that's what you're seeing here. I'm adjusting, making adjustments, making tonal adjustments. So all that's going over top of the entire painting. Anytime I do the light for the eyes or the shine or the even glow, I like to do over top of the entire painting. Now I'm making highlights for the embers that are blowing. And just more multiply, more overlay to give it that real standard lighting effect. And that is the Akuma piece. So basically just a real quick tutorial. Basically to take away from this, I use brushes that I build myself. Sometimes I'll just do a pencil sketch inside of whatever program I'm using if I'm doing digital paint. Sometimes I'll scan in a piece of line art that I've done. This is a piece of original line art that I scanned in and adjusted the actual ink and the blacks. So that's pretty much all it is. I like to get crazy with fire and lighting and flames, and as you see in this, and all I use are brushes that I built myself and overlay and multiply layers, and you can play with those. So if you have any questions, more in-depth, I wanted to keep this kind of short. I didn't want to give you a 10-20 minute tutorial because I know that you would get bored as it went along. So. But if you would like to see more of these from me in the future, if you would like some more longer videos, in-depth videos, this is just a toe in the water for me. People did request it, so I figured I'd make this my first one. So anyway, I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope it was informative. If you have questions for me, just leave a comment on this video, and I'll be happy to answer any and all questions. Make some awesome art. Thanks.